Welcome, everyone. Everyone arriving so quickly. I had the most ordinary and elegant image that popped into my head. It was like, when they open the doors at a concert and everybody goes, so strange. It's like, oh, here comes my friends. It's so great to see everybody. So let's find our seats and take our seat and sit together amidst all the kind-heartedness and goodness, the depth and commitment that your arrival demonstrates, sitting in the midst of all of that. There are so many important qualities which arise through our willingness to be silent together and still. Every wisdom tradition encourages it. we're not simply trying to be quiet. We're not waiting for something to arrive in the future. I think it's important to appreciate a reverence for silence and a respect. As it prepares us and encourages us and to meet a territory of what's unknown and maybe unknowable, and yet realizable and livable. But we don't know that. Just respecting what seems like nothing, this silence, but it's only nothing to that part of us that wants to be engaged in something. So this is not a period of waiting for something, as I said, and it's not something that later will fill. Welcome the silence. Offer your body to meet it through stillness. And appreciate the way that the silence is always present. And it's a patient, spacious presence even as we speak or act. You might notice an urge to fill a space or take care of someone if there's a long space of silence during our practice. Just notice that urge without acting on it. There's something more profound you're providing. But the spacious, attentive, wakeful silence. Vast is the robe of liberation, a formless field of benefaction. Wearing the universal teaching, I realize the one true nature, thus harmonizing all being. Vast is the robe of liberation, a formless field of benefaction. Wearing the universal teaching, I realize the one true nature, thus harmonizing all being. Vast is the robe of liberation, a formless field of benefaction. Wearing the universal teaching, I realize the one true nature, thus harmonizing all being. It's so very good to be back at home, and also back in this home with all of you. Pardon me. And I want to say first how much I appreciate those wonderful teachers who have supported and encouraged the Sangha on so many levels, including the three teachers who have offered themselves so fully in the weeks when I was away. Several weeks ago when Lori came forward, it's still ringing in my ears when she mentioned the statement, "Bodhisattvas teach by means of their own vulnerability." And the beautiful way that she embodied that teaching, those of you that were there, in which she began in a quite vulnerable way to narrate her own internal present moment experience of meeting fear and anxiety, and doing so in a way that was quite beautiful and appropriate, but quite tender. Bodhisattvas teach by the means of their own vulnerability. So what do bodhisattvas teach? What's their job? The bodhisattva's job is to meet each situation and each relationship and turn it just a bit more towards awakening, whatever's possible. And I could hear and feel in Lori's presence in her offering that this is what she was inviting. And I heard it in your responses to her. I saw it began to unfold. And then Suzanne, in the next week, took this up. How do we encourage this turn that the Bodhisattva takes? And how do we encourage this unfolding? And she named it that the foundation is what she called body fullness. Not just thoughtfulness, or mindfulness, but body fullness. Reminding us that wakeful attention is grounded in embodied sensation and lived out through our body, that's the ground of our being, our bodies, the shared heart and mind of this Buddha body. I'm reminded of the great dancer and teacher of dance in Austin, Deborah Hay. And one of her seminal books that she's written about her work, the title of that book is My Body, the Buddhist. And how are we to embody? Well, there are many practices. And Josh demonstrated one of them so beautifully the next week as he began to weave his summer reflections. But not just the kind of reflections we have when we come back to school and say, what I did on my summer vacation. He was weaving his heart and mind and soul in these experiences, most of which had some quality in that wonderful word you use in visualization, which most of us, I think, probably don't know. When I looked it up, it had some definitions about to watch over, especially like to monitor and examine. It said particularly British. So Americans, we wouldn't know it so much. But Josh reminded me in visual aid, it descends from the Latin verb vigilare, meaning to stay awake. To stay awake. And to be awakeful not just through cool curiosity, but through warm wondering. And this is the life of a bodhisattva. And these three bodhisattvas, I think, expressed it quite beautifully. And all of you met them in ways that were quite beautiful to help unfold those teachings. Through our vulnerability, as Lori spoke about, through body fullness, as Suzanne taught, and through our own stories of our lives as we watched over each other and stayed awake with each other in visual aid. So I want to take these a little bit further in my own ways and talk maybe a little bit about context for practice, which I spoke about in our sitting with silence. The practice of inquiry at the center, and the place for deep questions, which is the essence of Zen practice. And I want to recommend to you, pardon me, maybe most of you have seen the new book by Joan Sutherland, Through Forests of Every Color, Awakening with Koans. Even if you're not interested or wonder about koan practice, it's a beautiful book, and she's such a marvelous teacher and a beautiful writer. I would recommend it. And I also show it to you because I'm going to draw some things out. And specifically, if you have the book, because I know so many of you do, from chapter 2, which is called Born in Fire. And I'll tell you what that's about. Let's start with context. The current context of practice. Because context matters. This is one thing that I've been teaching on recently. So many people will take the idea that if one practices, that you would be, by your own personal efforts, you could be free. But context matters. It's part of what you're meeting, what you're intimate with, and what you're responding to all the time. And there's some history I've heard many of my teachers speak about, and Joan Sutherland talks about what happened in early China between the 6th and the 8th century, where everything seemed to be falling apart. Sound familiar? And the way that things were falling apart, and that time in China, over 1,000 years ago, was that there was overwhelming diseases, there were invasions, there was rebellion in the country itself, and famine. And 2/3 of the population died. So the people who have died from COVID, that's a drop in the bucket. Imagine that 2/3 of the people of the United States would die from the kind of things that we're facing. This is the context out of which Chan, these practices developed. And so not only was practice not diminished during that time, it was riveted. And you've heard me say this many, many, many times, and I was so, you know how exciting it is when somebody agrees with you? You know, I read this sentence in Joan Sutherland. She says, Chan practice wasn't about getting free of the world. It was about being free in the world. It's like, that's exactly what I said. It's so lovely to hear these teachings echo back, you know. And she reflected on Hui Ning, who was one of our deep ancestors at that time, saying that she said it's not enough to see what Buddha nature is. You have to realize what Buddha nature does, what it does. And this is what's important in this context. And this is what the three teachers in the last 3 weeks have been talking about. because the need was so great at that time. The need is so great at this time that there wasn't time for people to collapse in despair or lack confidence or run away. The need was too great. And it reminds me of Joko's invitation, if not demand, turn toward each moment. Not to rub your face in it. That is, it's not some sort of a meanness or being harsh with yourself. It's not a punishment or a failure if you don't, but what you begin to realize is that what's unfolding in this context, even as difficult as it might be, this is the great sutra revealing itself, this life. And that everything you see is Buddha nature. That doesn't mean everything you see is, so we map onto it. Goodness, it means everything is reality, is perfection, is what's happening. That's what Buddhists see. That's what they respond to. And everything you see is you. And at a time when these old teachers, that's what they saw. And what they saw were ruined villages, refugees, wildfires, dwindling lakes and rivers, clouded skies. We see clogged roadways, people with guns. This is the current sutra. This is all me, this is all you. So move deeper. Embrace this and see what needs to be done. What does Buddha nature do? And it's all happening in relationship, because awakening only happens between. There was a wonderful sentence that Sutherland used, and a word that, once again, is not an ordinary word. I love this. She said, practice is about making us fetchable. That curious, the way she used the word. Practice makes us fetchable. It helps us to recognize what gets in the way of our being fetched. Then it gives us a method to deconstruct the obstacles. What's in the way of life taking us and us taking life? And it's one of the reasons why it's important to be silent. It's sort of the crude, I know it's harsh, to people say, well, what are you doing in Zazen? It's like, well, sit down, shut up, and sit up straight. And see what you're caught by. That's a little harsh way to say it, but so this is the context. And then we meet in inquiry. The foundation of our Zen practice are these face-to-face encounters. That's how those koans came out of that. Because our form of practice is grounded in relationality, in ongoing concourse. It's not a private endeavor. Some of you who are I say this affectionately, Zen nerds who like the history. Shitu in China, or Sikito Kisen is the name in Japan, is one of our ancestors in Soto Zen. He's a very important ancestor. He wrote The Song of the Grass Hut. Some of you have read that poem. And he wrote the Sandokai, the merging of difference in unity, one of the things we chant in our liturgy often. And students came to him, and there was a summary of the way they were coming to him, and listened to this short 4 interaction summary, and imagine us here online, and imagine how it goes in inquiry. The student comes to Sakita Kisen 1,000 years ago and says, what am I supposed to do? And he says, why are you asking me? And the student says, well, where else can I find what I'm looking for? And he says, are you sure you've lost it? So you come, you raise your little hand there, and you come to me, and in some version or another, you say, what am I supposed to do? And I'm like, well, why are you asking me? Well, where else am I supposed to look for it? And in some way or another, you know that I keep reflecting back, are you sure you don't have it? Because I think you do. And his responses in that little summary of the vignettes are not dismissals of genuine questions. And I don't want to dismiss your genuine questions. That's not the point. Why are you asking me this now? And what is the question under the question? Because many of you know when you come forward, you get a little anxious. And many of you get anxious not because you're just afraid people are going to hear this or see it, or you know that it gets turned on you, where suddenly we've gone in a different direction. Because I'm looking for the question under the question. What is your deepest longing? And what if in the reflection of our relationality, you realize that you already have what you're looking for? And over, in a way, I'm keep reflecting to you, let go of trying to find the answer. To fix whatever you think's broken so you can like finally get it right. Looking for like the right position, the best position. And risk not having a position. There are positions to take and there are problems to solve out there in the world. Absolutely true. That's not what Zen practice is for. Zen practice is to help you become the person who can meet all of those solutions by not having a particular position, so you're free to take any position that's needed. This isn't about answering the question and finding the solution. It's becoming a person who can meet those solutions. So you're learning to be wholesomely unsure. What does it mean that my heart mind is the Buddha? What does it mean that all of this mess is the great sutra manifesting? That seems crazy. But Matsu, who's another one of the old guys at that particular time, and a famous ancestor in our lineage, imagine that he could be sitting in front of a computer screen instead of however many hundreds of years ago it was in China. And I'm going to read his words or translations. But imagine that this is what it's like to sitting in the screen where you and I meet, or even when you come and sit in the chair in front of me at Appamada. He said, right here and right now, he's saying this to the student, find your footing as a realized human being. Meet me eye to eye as an equal. You're a full human being. Meet me as an equal. Drop the notion that there's something to get. You already have it. And then the punchline. Let's see it. Show me. Show me what you got. And there's a poem that Sutherland adds in her teachings from EQ, which is a wonderful old ancestor. If you don't know about EQ, he was kind of a crazy guy. He hung out in brothels and bars and very interesting places on 6th Street a long time ago. For those of you that aren't in Austin, that's an interesting entertainment district. Here's the poem. And once again, imagine that EQ wrote this today and said this on CNN. I mean, that's a crazy idea, okay? A belly swollen full of hell, unending eons of passion, wildfires burning without end, but flowering grasses are born again in the spring wind. A belly swollen full of hell. It sounds a little bit like it feels to watch the news, huh? Unending eons of passion. Man, it's always been this way, hasn't it? It keeps on going. Wildfires burning without end, but flowering grasses are born again in the spring wind. But for Matsu, the hell, this hell, wasn't the trouble that he saw around him. Hell was turning away from it. The hell was trying to escape into some separate peace and not meet with the great sutra that's unfolding, which is what Lori and Suzanne and Josh were inviting, what I'm inviting in inquiry. And then lastly, I said I was going to talk about context and inquiry, then this thing about questions, because that's our primary technique. And these old worthies, that's a word that's sometimes used in Zen history. In other words, these women and men from the past that we read stories about, who were practicing together in the midst of everything falling apart, they didn't know that they were making up teachings. They didn't know that people were going to collect their conversations in koans and call them koans, and that there wasn't even such a thing. All they were doing is having conversations. And then years later, the power of those conversations are still echoing in our hearts and minds because they had something. But now, our conversations and inquiry that you can listen to on SoundCloud and you can see on YouTube are just ordinary conversations now, nothing more. Maybe the same kind of conversations. And Lori and Suzanne and Josh use vivid, personal, vulnerable, sensory language. And that language that we use in inquiry like this is, as Sutherland says, meant to stop the flow of habitual thought and feeling for a moment, to surprise us into seeing things differently, or at least into asking non-usual questions about them. It's meant to draw on other parts of our intelligence besides cognitive thinking, like intuition and imagination. And this is what happens, isn't it? Suddenly you find yourself in a space you didn't anticipate when you raised your hand. Not because you got an answer, but because you were led into a different space. And that's also why it's important not to jump into the space too quickly just to fill the space. It's also why it's important not to hold back and to jump into the space fully and wholeheartedly. But not to just fill the space or make sure there isn't a blank or to take care of me or to just speak for the sake of speaking it. What's the real question? Inquiry is not about answering your questions. It's about questioning your answers. Your answer to all of your questions is really easy to see. Just look at your life. Your life is the answer to the questions that you're meeting. That's how you're responding. So inquiry is not about giving you it's about questioning your answer. Your life. It's like, my life isn't working. Okay, your life is your answer, so let's question that. I'm going to give you an answer. I'm going to question your answers. Huining, the sixth ancestor, said, it is precisely Buddhist conduct that is the Buddha. It's what Buddha nature does. Not something you think, not an answer you get. Suzuki Roshi, centuries later, said, strictly speaking, there are no enlightened people. There's only enlightened activity. And it's not something you can have. It's an alive quality that flows through us. And the wonderful teacher, Peter Hershock, right over there in Honolulu, which I can almost see today, said it's not enough to see what Buddha nature is. This is the quote. You have to realize what Buddha nature does. And the underlying assumption of inquiry or the koans or any of these conversations that are alive is that being a human being isn't a problem to be fixed through spiritual practice. Instead, this is a precious, disturbing, wondrous, devastating experience that we ought to take full advantage of if we can. And I love this line from Sutherland. She says, even the much maligned self doesn't need to be dismantled, just redirected to its own business, which is the survival of the organism and the sense of continuity in the life that organism is leading. I mean, this ego thing is really important, not to be dismantled. Just realize it's not the only game in town. So our context is the relationality that opens us to the possibility of using everything as the ground of awakening, that we meet around the questions that arise and find that we have what we need, and our shaky vulnerability. I think in my email I said something about, I'll offer my imperfect best. I can't use something like that. That's all I'm asking. And then what's the question under the question? What's the real question? What's the thing that is, Suzuki Roshi called it your inmost request? That's what's important. There are so many wonderful things that happen in our sessions together, including support and encouragement and inspirational things. But it's not a support group. It's supportive. It's an inquiry group. We can ask and we go further. Based on the beautiful support we offer each other, thank goodness, we have the context to go further, because it's required in the world right now. With a belly swollen full of hell, see unending passions for eons, wildfires burning without end. But flowering grasses are born again in the spring wind. So, as they say in the head student ceremony, if you've never seen it, dragons and elephants, bring me your questions. It's kind of a funny line. What does this call up? What does it ask of you? I threatened to do this, so I'm going to go ahead and do it. So, Christiana, are you there? There you are.
I was hoping you were talking about another Chris.
I know, but remember I told you I'd probably call on you today. Did you have your storm yesterday?
A little bit, not much, a little bit.
Yeah. Um, I wanted to call you forward, actually, because I'm talking about things that have a good bit of power. Uh, and I just wondered what was called forward in you as I spoke about it.
Uh, well, I felt a great sense of joy throughout the whole talk. There were little parts of me that just were jumping up and down, and like little kids. And I had a little almost a subcontext while you were talking, and it was a dream that I had the night before yesterday. And sometimes I dream that that I'm with a teacher, sometimes men, sometimes women. But anyway, this teacher was saying some things as an instruction. And and the dream ended with, and she said, but most of all, are you getting bigger?
Hmm.
And so I kept thinking of that during your whole talk. I kept hearing that question. But most of all, are you getting bigger? And as you were talking, I just felt myself getting bigger.
Yeah, it certainly echoes that statement that Joko would talk about is, are we becoming a larger container?
Hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah.
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 And so when you felt this sort of joy or or energetic uplift, what is that? What was joyful about that?
The words that came to mind just now is the joy of meeting truth.
Uh,
It's, it reminds me of when I was a kid. We were immigrants that came when I was 4, and one of the things that we did when I was a kid, because we couldn't afford very much, we used to go to LaGuardia Airport to meet arrivals, just to watch at the arrivals building, and we saw people, and it actually makes me a little teary thinking about it. And I guess it must have evoked something in my parents, to see the meetings. But that's what this reminds me of. This So hearing what you said today reminded me of the arrivals building where, people who've not seen each other maybe for 25 or 50 years in some cases. And they just, you know,
mhm.
and
I love that image. Have you ever
yeah.
seen the students at UCLA were given pieces of music which were um, constructed by Ennio Morricone and played by Yo-Yo Ma,
Mm.
and make a small movie of one song. And I can't remember which one, but one of the students took one of the songs, and it was just a montage of people meeting at the airport.
Oh,
And talk about weeping.
oh.
It's very
Oh,
evocative because there's something about that, and that is the energy around which uh, these meetings are important. Thank you, and thanks for letting me call you
yeah.
forward out of the beautiful greenery of New England.
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jessica.
Yeah.
I was watching your face.
Mm,
Things were moving.
yeah. Almost immediately when you started talking, actually, I had tears, and I was wondering about that. And as you and Chris were speaking about it, and I think the best way to name it is just a feeling of coming home, to myself and to each other, to you, and these uh, is something that feels more um, real.
Hmm. Mhm. Good. And I spoke to you about this earlier, but you're recovering from COVID and you're feeling better.
Yes, I am feeling a lot better. I'm still, lingering just a little bit, but something feels like it's changed in me, and I'm in a bit of a liminal space right now
Mhm.
with that, with knowing what it is, but there's something deep that has shifted.
Yeah, and I could feel some of that. And I think part of what I'm doing is reaching across into that space um, to make a connection.
Yeah, thank you, Flint.
Mhm. Thanks, and thanks for holding our space today too. Mhm. Missy McCullough, come forward here. Yeah, just briefly, I just wanted to say I could see something in your face that it was very coming forward. I wanted to meet it. What's happening?
Let myself feel everything that's here, and it's like I don't know what the right word is, but uh, it's something in me is opening up is the best way to say it. Something's opening up, and when I was breathing, I could feel my lungs fill more.
I can
That's
see it.
yeah, and
That's why I called on you.
yeah, it's like this incredible feeling of, you know, I just feel like I'm opening and hearing and listening, and it just feels, I feel a lot of love from you and everybody else, and that is beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. That's why my inquiry is so incredibly special, because it really is like a big family.
Yeah.
And
As I spoke, I could see you lean in to certain things. So I wanted to meet the leaning. I wanted to meet it. So thank you for letting me call on you.
of course,
And I see some people have raised their hands. So Jessica will help us with that.
Hello, Flint. And I just want to refer to what the sutta that I used in my inquiry talk when the Buddha said, it was just brilliant, and the genius of the Buddha 2,600 years ago, putting together the mind and the body and saying, giving us the guidance to say to ourselves when I breathe, when I know I'm breathing in, I'm breathing in. Thinking thus, we train ourselves.
Mhm.
They train ourselves. So I just consider your inquiry and our participation is this whole embodiment of training.
Mhm. It
And
is.
it's why practice is so essential in the transformation, not only our personal transformation, but the transformation all around us in the world.
Mhm.
Now, I'm so grateful today in you presenting Joan's work and the cone work. I've never been attracted to cones, but I'm getting more and more attracted to them.
Well,
Um,
it's the quality of what they stand for, whether or not you enjoy the actual koan stories or not.
mhm.
It's what they do because
It turns,
turns
yes.
us in a way that nothing else can, and that's happening whether we use the traditional ones or not.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
And attraction or the lack of it has not been about preference or dislike. It's been about what?
Yeah,
What?
like they didn't really catch.
Yeah, what? That sort of thing. But when I read that sutta that I read to all of us a couple of weeks ago, something came together.
Yeah.
And the mind and the body are not one, they're just manifestations of experience.
Yes.
So thank you so much,
Thank
Flint.
you.
Mhm.
Oh, my old friend Richard.
Hi, Flint. Nice to see you. Really nice.
You.
I haven't been here as often as I would like, and I see some people that I haven't seen in a long time. Hi, Missy. And I could go on, and Margaret and Susan and on, but I won't. But one of the things that I thought of as you were talking, it came into my mind this morning. Um, Someone sent me, but also I saw if you get the New York Times, they mentioned that Joni Mitchell had done the Newport Folk Festival for the first time in 20 years. And if all of you saw it, it
I
just
just
brought
played
tears. Did you
I
see
just
it?
played her the one where she's doing the classic song, and I sent it to several of my friends, and we're all weeping together.
Oh, I couldn't, the minute she started, her voice is almost gone, but she sang Both Sides Now and several others. But that one and the
That one.
people on the stage singing, I was losing it.
Well,
And
so
then
were
the,
they. Everyone around her was crying, and the rest of the band was just watching, like, what are we seeing?
Well, so many of the band members looked very young, and I wondered if they knew how important. But if you haven't seen it, it was just, and the lyrics, I've looked at life from both sides now, from up and down, and still somehow it's life's illusions. I recall, I really don't know life at all. And it fit with what you were saying to me. And I just thought it was incredibly beautiful. And uh, she looked amazing. She's sitting down, of course. I think she's getting close to 80, but it was
70.
just a really touching moment or moments for me. And I wanted to say that evoked a lot, yours as well, but that made me think of that. So to all, if you haven't seen that, please
Worth it.
look at it. And she does several other songs if you get deeper in there, but that one, Both Sides Now, was really great. So,
Well, and without even going too much further, I'll just say, seeing your guitar behind you, did
yeah,
you? She also played a guitar solo.
I saw
And did
that.
you see what the woman, Brandy who was with her, did at the end?
I didn't.
She started doing full prostrations on the stage to her.
Oh, did she really? I didn't
Started
see
bowing.
that. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, it was touching. But anyway, nice to see all of
Thank
you.
you, Richard.
Nice to see you again. I'll try to be more uh, tuned in over the next while.
It's just lovely to see you.
Yeah, it's so great to see you too. And I heard that you had COVID. I just got over it, and I know Jessica's dealing with it. So anyway, the best to all. Thank you.
We have the lovely Ra.
Hi,
Hello.
it was nice to be introduced as the lovely Ra.
I thought that was appropriate. That was totally appropriate.
I'm not feeling very lovely, so it was particularly nice. Thank you, Jessica.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I thought I'd be that person to get up and say I don't know what I'm doing. Maybe I
Mhm.
speak for some other people here
Please,
today.
yes, of course.
Um,
But some part of you knew to raise your hand and come forward.
yeah, I thought if I came up and said I don't know what I'm doing,
That's what you're
some,
doing.
something would
Hmm.
come more to life.
Hmm.
Um,
That's what you're doing.
mm,
It's coming forward in life,
mm,
coming forward here in life. You see, because you and I are spotlighted, we're larger.
mm.
You see me primarily, but you see some other faces.
I see a few down the side, yeah.
You see a few. That's good. And there are many, many, many more. There are almost 80 more. So this is what she means by being fetchable.
Mm,
If you step forward, then you can be caught in a lovely way, not trapped. That caught a breath in. What was the breath?
that's what's wanted, I guess.
Ah,
You know, I something softened a bit. It's like
that's what I thought.
I can feel myself in the not knowing what I'm doing as like in a kind of reactive tussle.
But something softened when I mentioned the sort of fetchable idea and being
Mm,
that by others being here, you could be taken, held, and visualized, cared for. And then see, there's more softened breath now, as if that's the question under the question.
yeah.
Something like, and this is my way of saying it, this may not be your, will you hold me? Will you be with me?
Mm,
Will you see me?
mm.
Something in that.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. And can I show you? I haven't got a clue.
But not having a clue is what you're showing.
Yeah,
That
that's what I mean. That's what I want to show.
that
And
is the showing, and that's sufficient. You don't have to say, well, I don't really what I'm doing, and in a bit I will, and then no, that's the complete 100% showing.
mm,
That's the wholesome not knowing.
mm,
It's like, okay, let's rest together.
yeah.
Yeah, and another exhalation. Let's just walk together. Let's just sit on a stone and watch the sky together. I can imagine that in your landscape.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. I don't want any clever words or,
The image
I
that
can't,
just
they can't come. They can't,
that doesn't penetrate that place.
no.
The image I just had, and maybe it's just because of being in the landscape that I just mentioned in your part of the world, is when you on a footpath when you come to a fence and there's one of those little ladder like things that you use
Mhm.
to go over, and you hold out a hand to someone and help them as they go over on a walk. Maybe something like that. Oh, it's another big breath. And that's enough. And then you turn in whatever direction you decided to continue on, and you continue on. Together.
With a bow.
Yeah. Mucking along, you know.
Pardon.
Mucking along,
Mm.
you know, through the fields, but together.
Mm.
With those spring breezes or the summer breezes, even though it's a bit warm right now. And so will you continue walking with me?
Yes.
And I with you.
Thank you, Flint.
Let's voice the four practice principles, which are the reminder of how we meet and deconstruct the things that are in the way that make us fetchable. And remember those words. Caught in the self-centered dream, only suffering, holding the self-centered thoughts, exactly the dream. Each moment, life as it is, the only teacher, being just this moment, compassion's way. Caught in the self-centered dream, only suffering, holding to self-centered thoughts, exactly the dream. Each moment, life as it is, the only teacher, being just this moment, compassion's way. Caught in the self-centered dream, only suffering, holding to self-centered thoughts, exactly the dream. Each moment, life as it is, the only teacher, being just this moment, compassion's way. What a joy to be with you all. And Jessica?
Appamada's programs and facilities are thanks to all of you, and your generosity makes a huge difference. If you'd like to make a contribution, you can do so on the website at appamada.org/contribute. Thank you for being here, everyone, and for your input in the chat. Thank you for for sending out that video as well, so that we can all check out Joni Mitchell. Now I will hand it over to Maria if you'd like to stay after for some time on the porch.